Hello and welcome to the Wednesday Night War Preview Podcast. I'm Adam Wilbourn from WhatCulture, joined by the Dadley boys of WhatCulture, Michael Hamblett and Michael Sidgwick, here to look ahead to tonight's episodes of NXT and AEW Dynamite. But before we get into this, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts, where we not only review the Wednesday Night War, but also Raw, SmackDown, pay-per-views. We have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamblett and Michael Sidgwick to look ahead to tonight's Wednesday Night War. And is this the most important Wednesday Night War ever?
Certainly since the debut, just looking at the various conditions surrounding both, and there's a neat symmetry to it, which should give an indication of which promotion really is the hottest. Is one promotion just benefited from the Survivor Series build and its association with and supremacy over the main roster? Was the other one just really hot through a great Cody versus Jericho program? We're going to see the new shape and complexion of both brands. And realistically, after a very poor week for AEW, this is kind of crucial now. This is kind of into settling into a rhythm territory for better or worse.
I'm not even sure how much of this is by accident, but even the fact that TakeOver Portland is February, I think, and we could be looking around that sort of time for AEW's next pay-per-view. It's almost as if even the end destination is the same point. It's quite nice how it's worked out. Again, some of it might be by design from one of the other companies, but it's nice to think that they're both going to be on a relatively similar path between now and that next huge end destination for all the big angles that are just starting to come together.
We talked yesterday about whether or not AEW were in trouble. I don't think that they are really. I think it's Thanksgiving and all the issues around that we mentioned yesterday. Having said that, another disappointing week in the ratings, and questions will be starting to get asked.
I think they'll get asked if it's another poor episode of Dynamite. Not I think it was poor. We're talking a ridiculous curve.
It's all in relative terms with these shows, isn't it? You know?
Absolutely. I think if it gets another underwhelming, alarming rating, but they recover in form to like week 5, week 6 level, then I think that people will realize, oh, hang on, we might have misjudged this one. The buzz is back. It feels hot again. Maybe a certain main event storyline has been developed wonderfully over the course of a segment. Who knows? I think the more serious concern at this point is if they have another really wonky episode or a wonky hour, such as last week.
Yeah, what do you think is the priority? Because you and I have enjoyed NXT and watched them be beaten regularly by AEW, which has had fantastic programming as well. We watched them still lose every single week in both in the demos and in terms of the ratings. But we knew the quality of the product was good. So what's the most important thing here for AEW?
It's definitely quality for me. I think last week's rating was damning more for AEW because at the time and then in the follow-up, the discussion around the show was that was a kind of poor episode of Dynamite. It was one thing that it had a bad number because they'd promoted a big card and it didn't perform. But we reviewed the show the next day and all kind of confessed that this is probably our least favorite episode of Dynamite thus far. Quality will always trump everything else because if you look at the discourse online or if you look at reviews the next few days, if people are talking about a show being strong and being worth going to watch, that ultimately will drive the ratings back up. All the kind of positives that people will be spewing about this show, they'll share it with their friends. They'll say, maybe go and give Dynamite another look, or people will watch replays, things like that. The product's quality always has to come first. That's pro wrestling ultimately. Like momentum is built from weeks and weeks and weeks of high quality stuff, not just one banger of an episode. We see now WWE can't even maintain that with a big Raw. When they bring all the stars back. Yeah. AEW can quite easily get the talking points back with one good episode of Dynamite.
Before we get on to AEW Dynamite and looking ahead to that tonight, then let's look at NXT. Michael Hamblett, I wish I could tell whether you preferred NXT or AEW. If there was some sort of visual clue for that, it'd be really helpful. But it's an interesting place for NXT to be in because there was, on a hot streak coming off the back of Survivor Series. They obviously had all the stuff prior to Survivor Series and War Games. Yeah. This week kind of feels like a bit, there's obviously storylines rolling over, but a bit of a clean slate for them.
Yeah, which of course can't then, to mix up the metaphors, just turn into a brick wall. They can't find all these characters that have had so much going on, suddenly run out of steam at the worst possible time and just have just nothing to run into, nothing to move forward with in the next stages of their sort of development. I look at the triple threat situation building around the NXT title as being something that they need to reheat, because I don't think Finn Balor and Tommaso Ciampa's match like was hot enough and was good enough to make people want to see different combinations of that top line. I've ultimate faith in Adam Cole. I think he remains the talismanic figure of this brand as it goes through this, quite big transitional period to being a TV wrestling show. But I don't think you can just do, as the main roster would, those rotating singles matches as a way to build this now. I think they need to really focus on Ciampa's quest for Goldie and Finn Balor's own individual reasons for being back. It's got to be story rather than pro wrestling. And I wouldn't have thought that with those three guys when you first put their names into the mix.
What do you think? What next for Cole, Gargano, and Balor? Gargano even? Ciampa?
I've got no idea, but it's kind of I don't want to dump on NXT in the way they do things, but because of the imposition, of Survivor Series on the various individual character arcs in NXT, it feels like the last couple of weeks have been a bit week to week. So I've not really seen many storyline threads, maybe in the women's division, but certainly not in the men's, that have been planted at one point where I'm really looking forward to seeing them picked up rather than, Ciampa wants his title back. That's ultimately the only sort of thread I've got to hang my interest on. So I'm with Hamflet here. I would love to see not just a sort of good, not great TV match. I want to see an actual angle or a segment that feels really worthy of my interest. So that's what I'm after on NXT tonight.
One of your big bugbears when it comes to NXT is the very sort of by-the-numbers builds that they've had, particularly since transitioning onto television. Do you think that's something that they need to take a look at?
Yes. You know what I would do? Not that I want to delve into fantasy booking because these people are better in it than I am, but my favourite part of NXT TV this year was when Adam Cole was a touring bastard and he went to Cleveland and he had a massive dump all over Johnny Gargano's dad's pizza joint, and he went to his wrestling school and was just saying everyone here is absolutely rubbish. No wonder.
Quick.
Look who you're inspired by. It was absolutely wonderful. I would like to see Adam Cole and NXT's writing team to do something outside of the box, consistent with how great all that was. Maybe something to do with Ciampa's surgery. He could maybe, just something off the top of my head, go to his surgeon who's been in the news this week and just say something like, "Are you sure you did a good job? What was his condition of his neck really like?" Just something that makes him look like a complete dick and not just this incredible and incredibly hard-working wrestler who I can't not respect at this point for what he's put his body through. I like to see a story built and the alignments reinforced of why I'm meant to boo this man.
One of the most intriguing things as we look to tonight's Wednesday Night War is the scheduled match between Rhea Ripley and Dakota Kai. So exciting to see what they do with this.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like the best kind of pro wrestling that, because it's been completely mutated by WWE's main roster, that a lot of people are missing the point. There's a kind of, it's more value range, but there's a kind of parallel to Cody versus Jericho. Everyone was saying ahead of that match, oh, well, they can't have Cody when it's too soon, and they can't have Jericho lose. That's too soon. It's like, that's the drama.
Yeah.
That's the point. That's the great thing about this. There's no clear winner. There's so much stakes involved that they're kind of unbearable for your mentality as a fan to consider the outcome. That's what great pro wrestling and great drama is. To a obviously lesser extent, it's more TV flavored than an actual big world title match. I'm getting vibes from this because Dakota Kai's just into a heel run. Rhea Ripley is more than ready for Shayna Baszler. So I'm going to watch this with keen vested interest because both characters have got a huge amount to lose. That's great drama. That's what it is.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's really cool that they get into this. I think it's ballsier than they'd ever be in WWE normally when they've clearly just created a hot heel out of nowhere and they find Rhea Ripley probably at the hottest that she's ever been. My worry, of course, is that there won't be a finish here because NXT can do that in a way probably AEW can't because there's less of an expectation. And there's just too much going on in the exterior lives of these characters away from this match. These two want to fight each other because of what happened at War Games, but ultimately we know the obvious directions of both going forward. Personally, I think why not be brave and have Dakota Kai go over? It's okay to book Rhea Ripley to lose in circumstances that maybe aren't favourable to her because at this point, she's absolutely ready for Shayna Baszler. She has proven herself. But my sense is that a great match maybe won't be satisfied by a solid ending because of either Tegan Nox on this side or Shayna Baszler on the other side or just so many other moving parts that they've got going on. But I do really love this division. So often those things don't feel half as unsatisfying as, say, they might do on a SmackDown match going to waste or something.
They could Gato book this by having Dakota Kai going over Rhea Ripley. Rhea Ripley finds another way to get to Shayna Baszler, wins the title, and then you've got your ready-made contender. Yeah. Something like they should have done with Asuka and Becky Lynch at the Rumble this year. post WrestleMania, but didn't. They could just follow that template.
Absolutely. One other match that we know is going to be taking place tonight on NXT is Damian Priest versus Killian Dane. I was pleasantly surprised with their triple threat at War Games.
I thought
what was it like being there?
It was awesome because the crowd were really with Pete Dunne. That's not to sort of drag either of those two. Damian Priest looked particularly great. I thought it was easily Killian Dane's best contribution to NXT since he's come back. But that, I think, was I'm quite worried about this because that was really carried by the Chicago crowd, knowing that they were coming back tomorrow night and they wanted to see Pete Dunne get the shot against Adam Cole. And I think that, especially like I watched it back on television when I got home, and especially like that second run of false finishes, I think was a little bit indulgent, but the live crowd were eating it all up. So I worry that without all of those sort of extraneous factors, this match will kind of struggle. But I really have been impressed with Damian Priest. I think he's been one of the low-key standouts of NXT in the USA Network era, because immediately you're looking for guys to come virtually from nothing and show themselves. And I don't think he's looked exposed, and I mean, obviously he's not inexperienced because he's been doing this for 10 plus years. But as a new character, often like these guys kind of get introduced a bit quickly on NXT, and I don't feel like he's out of place at all.
No, I really enjoyed watching Damian Priest in NXT.
I can't pretend to be interested about this match. I'm really sorry. I wasn't really into the three-way dynamic, even though I thought the match, when it was good, was really good. It did go over long. I think that's a general consensus. But that dynamic didn't interest me, and now they've removed the most interesting and good part of it, so I just can't be interested. They need to do more with Killian Dane. And the thing is, they have done way better in the past with him, so I don't think any hope is lost.
No, exactly. I mean, I was watching the old War Games
it was
when
phenomenal.
he had the key and
it was
murdered people in that one.
They wouldn't say this out loud about this match as well, but we've talked before about both brands kind of sticking to their plan rather than like trying to book in relation to what the other side's doing, and this is not a ratings drawing match. So I've got faith, at least in NXT process, that they've got plans for these characters. I've got plans for the next beat of the story without expecting this to like draw a high quarter hour, because this is not one of them like poster matches, as you would say, at all.
Let's transition over to AEW Dynamite then. Before we get into some of the matches, what does AEW need to do differently to win back some of their fans if they are leaving the product? Because there's one argument, of course, of Thanksgiving and the demographics is arguably the, in the worst possible way, the perfect demographic to be missing at Thanksgiving is the AEW demographic. But on the other hand, you could, it's been going down the viewing figures as much as the product has been fantastic. So what do they need to change up for you?
I think the last 2 weeks have been marked by, from a very good place, good faith experimentation with getting various characters over. And I think there's just a little bit too much to process. I mean, I, as an invested hardcore fan, I'm really enjoying what they're doing with the Dark Order, but it's going to take a lot for the guys who are more casually interested in watching the show to suddenly care about them and care about this Wardlow and MJF development with Cody. But hang on, he's having a feud with these two other complete random unknowns. It feels like they've answered initial, I wouldn't say protests, but initial criticisms about how match heavy and front loaded with stars the original format was. They're doing necessary ugly groundwork now that isn't particularly interesting, with the idea that, trust us guys, it will become interesting later on. I think they can park some of it to one side, and on paper it feels like they're doing it tonight.
It would make sense to have an MJF promo tonight following him winning the beautiful Diamond Ring.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting because as much as I've absolutely adored Chris Jericho, I think looking at last week's rating and to a degree, he's almost too entertaining for his own good.
Yeah.
Maybe a week off from Jericho, just to remind us that, that show was really good, but I miss Chris Jericho. That can't go far at all.
I mean, they are in
me.
Champagne, so that seems like they'll struggle to do that, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've read reports of 10,000 bottles of bubbly being sold as well already on that website, which is
They'll be
ridiculous.
selling it at the show tonight. There'll be just people swigging it in the seats if they can catch them on camera.
Genuinely, TLDR, all they need to do is put on a total banger of a card, which it looks like on paper, and then suddenly the rhetoric and the dialogue and the discourse all changes, and they go, remember last week when this company was dead and buried? And that's the kind of take that they are aspiring to generate online.
As much as you talked about them sort of including more sports entertainment elements to their show, they do, by the looks of things, look like they've returned to the basics here, just a lineup of 5 fantastic matches on paper, which if you have a smattering of promos, as we mentioned in there, could form for one of their best shows.
I know, like, it wasn't a great success in the ratings ultimately. I think it was last week's show that, like, I flippantly called AEW Takeover because it just felt like there was no space for anything but quality. Problem was, a couple of the matches didn't actually deliver last week, so they've taken the same approach this week, and they just need the bangers to be bangers. We can't have an MJF Hangman Page situation on our hands where you're kind of looking at your watch, where you're just waiting for the finish and thinking, why is this not really clicking? It was the Best Friends and Lucha Brothers last week.
That was a weird match.
Yeah, you can't really afford, like, you've got Phoenix there this week, for example, and you just can't afford for those safety net quality matches to be letting you down while you're maybe trying to use the wrestling to bring some of those viewers back.
Before we get onto the Lucha Bros' match, we should mention Jon Moxley versus Joey Janela. This will be good.
This should be everything to this episode of Dynamite because the match should be fantastic. Jon Moxley, we can still assume, is considered one of the big stars alongside Chris Jericho and Cody and the like. So this feels like a main event. It reminds me a lot of the week where he fought Darby Allin and elevated him even in defeating him. He's proven this year across New Japan and AEW that he's this versatile wrestling polymath. Janela has come on in ways that I didn't expect, to be honest, in AEW so far. Fair enough, he's been opposed against Kenny Omega, which is going to help. But I think the perception has carried with that. And that's how you build a pro wrestler. You want to make people believe that he's on the level of the guy he's fighting. And this feels like just perfectly pitched. I think they're both in exactly the right place to be taking on each other now.
It feels like it's going to be a different but equally successful version of the Moxley versus Darby Allin match, as you point out. Lots and lots of unhinged apron stuff. A very violent match without using plunder or weapons. Basically a beat-for-beat recycling of that story in such a way that builds up Moxley in the win-loss rankings, gets Janela over in defeat. This is their bread and butter at this early point. They are really good at saying, right, this is our established star. This is the guy that you probably haven't heard about, but you'll come out impressed by the rising star, and the established guy will be further established.
I do wonder if this is the week, and I think they've done it once before, and I can't remember at the moment, but I do wonder if this is the week where they use that similar finish to how Jake Hager smashed Darby Allin in the face to cost him against Chris Jericho. The story here is that Moxley wants to get up the rankings to get closer to Chris Jericho. I wonder if the Inner Circle actually try and cost him, and in that way that isn't unsatisfying and cheap, but Joey Janela gets points on the board unexpectedly through someone like Hager or someone like Proud and Powerful coming and doing the damage to Moxley, because he's having these matches for the pure purpose of getting to their boss. So what a way to stop him. This would be the time to start doing it, wouldn't it?
You mentioned Proud and Powerful there, a rerun of their match with the Young Bucks again tonight, but with the added elements of Sammy Guevara and Dustin Rhodes. What do you think about that?
That's going to be awesome. I really love the first match. This will be, in effect, given the runtime of Dynamite and how the TV matches tend to go, the match a lot of people expected in its stead, like just more of a banger, less emphasis on storytelling and psychology. But ultimately, what you're going to get from this match, you'd expect, is Sammy Guevara being a complete little tosspot, doing everything to evade Dustin Rhodes, who he's drawn the ire of recently, all leading up to a great, great, great body slam spot.
Yeah.
And maybe even a Shattered Dreams. Like, they'll structure it around that. It should be loads of fun and advance quite a few storylines, because I suspect Hager will cost Dustin Rhodes the match, and that'll lead to that.
Let's talk about Lucha Bros then. Both in action, Pentagon Jr. against Christopher Daniels and Rey Fenix against Trent.
Well, I know which one I'm more looking forward to, without being disrespectful to Christopher Daniels and Pentagon. That could and should, in my opinion, be more about angle and match. Pentagon is this cruel killer, and Christopher Daniels is getting on and can be incredibly sympathetic, being dropped on his head over and over and over again. Phoenix, for me, I want him in the singles matches every week. Like the first little taste that we got a couple of weeks ago just showed you everything that he gets to flex in smaller doses in these tag matches. And I think this will buy again. Trent is awesome. He's had, there's a match that I think a lot of us look fondly back on against Kenny Omega from 2016, but he's done it in dribs and drabs, and you can see it in the tag matches. Trent's actually got something a little bit special, I think, underneath the hood of the best friends banter. And I think he'll show it against Phoenix. It's going to be the match of the night, and I think it could possibly be the match of the Wednesday Night War this week, because Phoenix just has to be Phoenix, and Trent's proven in these environments before to kind of put his working boots on.
Yeah, going to be a total sleeper banger, Phoenix versus Trent. I really can't wait for it. It's a match I'm most looking forward to. Pentagon versus Christopher Daniels. My hope is that it doesn't go too long. It's not just for the sake of exposing Christopher Daniels as a singles guy, because that's why he's been so effective in the SCU unit for so long.
At his advancing age as well.
Yeah, exactly. It conceals his limitations physically perfectly. It's a great act for him to be in. I think we might see a return of the Fallen Angel, which you should get a nostalgic pop among that demographic and what they are sort of like the secret history of pro wrestling that they're drawn to. We haven't seen it in years, so I think a lot of people will be engaged with it. but not just for the fact that he can't work a 15 or even a 12-minute singles match without sort of people realizing, oh, this guy's, getting on a bit. It's a blood feud, more or less.
Yeah.
He absolutely battered his neck. He should be coming out the gates firing. I'd like to see a 7-8 minute brawl/sprint as much as he can run at this point. Just, it can't go anything longer than 12.
Can't start with a lockup. That's what it can't feel like the normal pro wrestling match. Yeah.
For an in-character match and for the benefit of the performer, give us 8 wild, fun, cathartic minutes.
Didn't this all begin with them decking SCU on the ramp? So it'd be great if Pentagon came out first and Daniels took a run at him on the ramp, and that's how the match started.
That's the kind of callback storytelling I more than trust this brand to do. So hopefully, it can't, as you said, it can't stand with a lockup.
Last but not least, everyone has been raving about Chris Statlander, particularly after last week, facing Hikaru Shida this week. Another match that could steal the show potentially.
Yeah, it should be really good. I'm not saying that all AEW fans do this, nor should they be asked to do this at all. But I've been hearing the whispers and the murmurs of how good this Chris Statlander is. I've seen just about enough evidence of it on Dynamite thus far. I mean, it was one match. But I watched a match that she had with MJF in Beyond Wrestling, and just for a pure spectacle of a man doing dickhead things he shouldn't be doing to a woman in a competitive match versus how much more athletically gifted she is than MJF and how much that informed the comeback. Great little independent wrestling match. I'm very high on Chris Statlander on its evidence. Hikaru Shida is really polished, really knows what she's doing. She's the perfect opponent for someone who's as promising as she is raw. I'm expecting big things from this.
Chris Statlander's exciting in that way that often in wrestling, there's a pushed project that isn't turning out well, and then from underneath that, something blossoms that nobody was expecting. The obvious example being, say, like Batista from the embers of the Randy Orton push. This feels like we could look back on the first year of AEW, having reflected on Britt Baker's push not really working, but Chris Statlander being the kind of main event.
That's a good
women's
comparison.
babyface that we maybe kind of needed all along. It's okay for that one to fail because there's always time to go around and do that again or turn heel or whatever, and then we have a year's time and say, oh, well, it was actually just Statlander's time, it wasn't Baker's time yet.
An intriguing build to tonight's Wednesday Night War then. Very quickly, who do you think will win the Wednesday Night ratings war this week?
I think NXT have got the jump on them now. I don't think they truly capitalized on the momentum they built at Survivor Series, but I think the best thing AEW can hope for is delivering a complete smash of a show, a nice 8-9 out of 10, and hoping that the conversation, if not the metrics, are steered in their favor.
I'm not prepared to put a pasty on it, but I actually think AEW are going to edge it this week. I really do think a lot was to do with a lost audience last week. I'm not prepared to put a pasty on it. I ain't got the guts on this one. I think it's going to be too close. I think this might say it then. I think this might be the narrowest one yet, the narrowest win yet for AEW. But my worry is obviously, say if it's 700,000 versus 650,000, we're still looking at a diminished audience. But I genuinely don't think NXT followed up quite as strong as they should have done last week. And I think there was maybe 100, 200,000 AEW fans missing that will just pop back in this week.
He's convinced me. I'll take that bet. I'll back AEW.
Double or nothing?
No, we can do double. I was going to say, I still realise I do owe you a pasty from last week. So you can either do double or nothing or just a completely separate bet. It's down to you.
Do you know
how confident you are?
Do you know what I want?
What?
Just a pasty, mate.
Okay.
So I just want the pasty from last week.
Okay, I get pasty from last week, and this is a fresh pasty bet for
So
this
I think
week.
NXT's going to win?
Yeah.
So that passes in the bank and this one's fresh and baked.
Absolutely.
That's thrilling. Absolutely thrilling. I was just glad to be in the audience for that.
Let us know your thoughts ahead of tonight's Wednesday Night War in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from for daily wrestling podcasts. Myself and the Dadley Boys will be reviewing the Wednesday Night War on there tomorrow. You can let us know your thoughts as well on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE and watch there. Follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
M. Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Adam Wilbourn. Follow us all, as I said, at WhatCultureWWE. This has been the Wednesday Night War preview. My thanks to the Dadley Boys. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.